Is faith a quantity or is it a state? Hi, this is Ken Yates from Grace Evangelical Society, and I'd like to discuss that particular issue there. I was asked that question at lunch about a month ago. A friend of mine asked me that question. At first, I had to think about what he meant, but then it became very clear what he was referring to. A lot of people look at faith as a quantity. You have a little bit of faith or you have a whole bunch of faith. And we hear it used that way, for example, with faith healers, who, if you go to them for healing and you don't get healed, they'll say things like, well, you didn't have enough faith. If you had a great faith, you would have been healed. But since your faith was just a little bit, it didn't work out for you. Or you need to grow in your faith. And you also hear it used this way when people say, did you really believe that? And we hear phrases like that all the time. A lot of times, again, people use faith or they describe faith as a quantity. In other words, how much faith do you have? The other side of that question is faith a state? Which simply means I am convinced that something is true. And I either believe it or I don't believe it. It's not like I believe it a little bit or I believe it a lot. I'm either convinced that something is true and therefore I believe it, or I don't. If I'm not convinced, then I don't believe it. It's not that I have a little bit of faith. It's I don't have any faith. And when we ask that question, it's kind of like, if I could use an illustration. Suppose someone asked me if I believed that George Washington was the first president of the United States. And I say, yes, I believe that George Washington was the first president of the United States. And then I go off to some university and get a PhD in U.S. history. Well, I don't believe that George Washington, after I get that degree, I don't believe that George Washington was the first president of the United States more or in a greater way. It's not that I grew in my faith. I'm convinced that he was the first president of the United States before I got the PhD in history and afterwards. I didn't grow in it. And this is important because a lot of times when people talk about faith that saves, they'll talk about, did you really believe? Did you have genuine faith? And when they use it that way, what they're doing is they're treating faith as a quantity. But again, that's not what faith is. Faith is being convinced that something is true. When it comes to the faith that saves us from hell, we are either convinced that Jesus gives us eternal life that can never be lost, or we're not. It's not like I really believe that, or I'm going to grow in that faith. Everyone who has eternal life, at some time in their life, they were convinced that Jesus gave them eternal life as a free gift that can never be lost. John 3:16. Now, what about those passages in the Bible that talk about a great faith? Well, there's two people in the Gospel of Matthew, for example, that Jesus says has great faith. Now, some would argue, well, doesn't that mean that they had a little bit of faith and then something happened and their faith grew and now they really believe it and they have a great faith? No, that's not what's happening at all. And these two people are found in Matthew 8 and in Matthew 15. In Matthew 8, there's a Roman centurion who believes that Jesus can heal. And there's lots of people in Israel that believe that Jesus can heal. But this centurion says to the Lord, my servant is sick and you don't need to come to my house. Just say the word and my servant will be healed. In other words, he believed something different about Jesus. He believed that Jesus could heal over a distance. And so his great faith was not that he believed that Jesus could heal more than other people. He also believed that Jesus could heal over a distance and he didn't need to come to his home. A similar thing is found in Matthew chapter 15 with the Syrophoenician woman who's also a Gentile. She believes that Jesus can heal her daughter who is possessed by a demon, but she believes something else. She says that his power is so great that it extends to the Gentiles like her. And she describes it as the crumbs falling off a table and the dogs underneath the table are able to eat from the crumbs. And she goes, I'm a Gentile woman, and I know that you're so great, that your greatness and healing power extends to me. See, she believes something new as well. She knew that Jesus could heal, and other people knew that, but she believed something else, that he was so great that his mercy and his power extended to someone like her, even though she was not a Jew. So in the final analysis, faith is a state. It's being convinced that something is true. You have great faith when you are convinced that more things are true than someone else who doesn't believe those things. But faith is always a state. It's not a quantity. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd ask that you would press the like button and the subscribe button. And remember, keep grace in focus.